Last week, a report by a QC confirmed what Katie had told us, concluding that bullying and harassment in MPs' offices is widespread, and a minority of them behaved in ways which are not acceptable and fall far short of what we should expect from our elected representatives. Today, MPs will debate the bullying and harassment of their own staff. Let's introduce journalist Kate Maltby, also former parliamentary clerk Hannah White, Labour MP Justin Meadows, who will speak at today's debate, and Elliot Wilson, another former staff member of the House. Welcome all of you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. I'm just going to, for the benefit of our audience, I just want to read a couple of examples from Gemma White's report, because it's really important to realise what some members of staff have been experiencing. An MP requests that the researcher should vacuum and dust the member's flat ahead of a private party. The staff member is placed in a very difficult position. If they agree, they give themselves a task beyond the terms of their employment at no gain to themselves. If they refuse, they risk souring a working relationship, which is necessarily a highly personal one. Another experience. The MP would intimidate, mock and undermine me every day, often shouting me. Another experience. I was in tears on an almost daily basis as a direct result of their behaviour. The MP regularly undermined me and my work, both in one-to-one meetings and in front of other employees. They'd send me emails at all hours of the day, including weekends, expecting an immediate response, and would accuse me of letting them down if they didn't get one. Justin Meadows, is any MP going to face any consequences?
Well, I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? That we've had all these allegations made. It's very unclear at the moment what the sanctions are of any substance. There's been talk about restricting MPs' access to the library and things like that, but no real significant sanctions to actually send out the message to the staff that actually this kind of behaviour won't be tolerated, and send out a message to the MPs that they've got to behave in a much better way.
I mean, I'm not necessarily just talking about sanctions. Is any MP going to be investigated for some of the things that were reported to Gemma White? Well,
I don't think it was part of her remit to look at individual complaints, but what she did say very clearly was that a lot of staff don't have confidence in the current independent scheme, because first of all, they don't consider it independent because MPs will be sitting in judgment on their own colleagues, which I think is a real problem.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, the kind of the fact that it's called independent and it's actually MPs.
Yeah.
Who are...
there are lay members on it, but there's still MPs sitting in judgment.
Absolutely, so it can't be described as independent.
And you wouldn't have any other workplace where work colleagues would be sitting in judgment on their other workmates for a complaint of that nature.
Only in political parties, it would seem. Yeah. Kate Maltby, people who experience abuse and harassment in Parliament sometimes contact you. What kind of experiences are they relaying to you?
Well, I don't think any of us who've worked on this issue were surprised by the Gemma White report. Frankly, we weren't even surprised by things like her comments about examples of a, quote, a very serious sexual assault. I've heard complaints like that. Many people who come to me for advice who are very, very sceptical that they'll get any justice. And to be honest, you know, I'm impressed that Justin is here. I made a complaint about the Conservative Party. I've been very critical of the Conservative Party's handling of this. But what we're also seeing in the Labour Party at the moment is that the internal disciplinary system is in so much chaos. And so, you know, we've all seen the stories about anti-Semitism, but frankly, it's the case that the same disciplinary system is supposed to be investigating sexual harassment cases. It's just as troubled in looking at that. And the truth is that
it's actually a slightly different internal disciplinary situation, but for me, I actually think that all political parties should move to independent systems of investigation for all complaints, and that way we can get away from this situation where people don't have confidence that the system is actually going to deal with these
things
properly.
Which is what some are pushing for in the Labour Party when it comes to anti-Semitism. Hannah White, MPs are in this really quite unique... Sorry, MPs' staff are in this uniquely vulnerable position in that they are directly employed by MPs. So as the report points out, complaining would be career suicide.
Absolutely. So they're recruited by MPs and then the MP is their boss, and they really don't have any convincing alternative. If they feel that their boss's behaviour is inappropriate, who do they complain to? And then they're in an office day in, day out with this person who, you know, could be treating them really badly. So they are in this uniquely vulnerable position. And what is worse is that many of these people want to see a career for themselves in politics. And it's not just if you fall out with your current MP employer, then you might not be able to feel comfortable working with them if you report something that they've done. But you might then feel that you couldn't work for any other MP or indeed pursue a career in politics because people will mark you out as a troublemaker.
When you worked there as a parliamentary clerk, did you see it? Did you experience it?
Yes, I experienced instances of bullying behaviour by senior MPs who
like what?
Who took exception. There was a time when I ran a committee. I gave some advice to the chair of the committee during the course of that committee. Afterwards, the member who had been the subject of that advice, he'd been told to curtail a very long speech he was making, found me in a remote corridor of the House of Commons and berated me at length about who did I think I was, did I know how long he'd worked in the House, how long had I worked in the House, at length for having simply done my job. But there were many far worse instances than that, and the reason I want to speak out about this is because there are, former colleagues and friends of mine who've been subject to really unacceptable behaviour.
Is that MP still an MP who shouted at you?
Yeah.
Would you consider retrospectively, if you were able, if they changed the cut-off date, making a complaint?
I could do that, but the difficulty is for the people who are still trying to make a career for themselves in the House, it's very difficult to contemplate
You could do that because actually it's not that historical, it's actually...
No, I could do it if the House today votes to allow historical cases to be investigated.
Yeah.
I would feel able to do it because I've now left.
Right.
But I think the difficulty is that, it's interesting, when the Cox report came out last year, there were a number of people who were former members of House staff who were able to speak out. But it's been really notable since Gemma White came out how few current or former MP staff members have been willing to speak,
Yes.
and put their faces out there on the media on programmes like this.
And we're very grateful that you're here. We've tried really hard to get some of the people who have experienced bullying and harassment, some of whom gave evidence to Gemma White, some of who didn't. But we were unable to, which is why we replayed some of what Katie told us in November, which is exactly what Gemma White has been saying. Elliot Wilson, a former staff member of the House, did you see it? Did you experience it?
I suppose I did. I was certainly shouted and sworn at occasionally by senior members of the House.
Do you mean MPs?
MPs,
Yeah.
yes. But I think I certainly saw more of it happen to other people and heard horror stories. And I think what's most worrying, and really I think the most insidious and corrosive phrase that comes back again and again and again if you work in the House is, you know what he's like. Because people do think there is a culture, and I think there is still a culture in fact, where you just have to accept it. You get on with the job, you do your best, but you accommodate the fact that some members of Parliament are well known to be either bullies or unsafe to be in the company of young women alone, or whatever it is their failing is. But anybody who's worked in the House could name 4 or 5 people and their various faults, failings and misdemeanours. But there is a culture of saying, well, you just get on with it. And that's, I think, very, very corrosive.
Yeah. And sorry, Kate, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if it's been made clear to everyone, but the Gemma White inquiry really doesn't name names.
No.
We all talk about the well-known figures. Most of those names have still not come out in public. The White inquiry is the latest of, frankly, a series of inquiries. We've had so many reports. All of us who work in this field, frankly, have seen endless reports without making change. And while the White inquiry, by not naming names, has actually allowed more people to speak, because there's more confidentiality, more anonymity, as a temperature testing exercise, it doesn't really do much, because I fear, and this is the reason some of us did come out and name names 2 years ago, that actually nothing changes unless those individuals face personal sanctions. It's not enough to just roll our eyes and say there's a cultural problem. I'm afraid unless you make examples of people, unpleasant as that is, the rest of them still feel they can get away with it.
But in order to make examples of people, individuals who've experienced such behaviour have to make a complaint. And as we've discussed, there's not confidence that they'll be believed. It could be the end of their career. I mean, again, in Gemma White's report, it said, some of the people who'd experienced this behaviour didn't want to make a complaint because they were worried that the MP would lose their seat at the next election, and they felt guilty about that.
Well, I mean, I understand the dilemma that people are in, but really, if behaviour is unacceptable, we've got to call it out, and absolutely, we have no right as members of Parliament to criticise other companies, the likes of Amazon or Sports Direct, if they don't treat their staff properly, if we are guilty of exactly the same.
Do you understand why some people were saying that? They felt a loyalty to the party. It would be damaging to the party. They felt a loyalty to the MP.
I understand that, but that means you're defending unacceptable behaviour, and
Right.
and it can't carry on. People have got to accept that certain things are no longer acceptable in the workplace.
OK, so the so-called independent complaints and grievance scheme, by consensus, is useless. Yes. So, as Dame Laura Cox suggested, which was the report in November last year, there has to be something totally independent. Is that... I mean, the House of Commons Commission also said, yes, there has to be a totally... And nothing has still happened. So there has to be a vote today saying, yeah, we've got to do this? Or so do you trust the current leader of the House to instigate this, or what?
Laura Cox made 3 recommendations. Yeah. One was put in place immediately, getting rid of the old system, which wasn't working. The second was historic complaints, that the independent complaints and grievance scheme only allowed people to pursue complaints from the 2017 election onwards, behaviour that happened after that. The third thing, which we've really seen no progress on, which is really lamentable, is Laura Cox's recommendation that there needs to be a scheme which is independent of MPs. The Commission, you know, it was very easy for the Commission to say, oh, we endorse these 3 recommendations, and then to know that nothing would happen about it unless the Commission and the Leader of the House really push that forward. We've now got a staff working group, I think, drawing up options for removing MPs from the process. That could have been done a year ago, and I think it's, you know, it's really shows the lack of political will behind this.
Right. I just want to read, if I may, a couple more things from the report last week, because it's really shocking. Members of the House of Commons... MPs' staff being expected to look after children and pets of MPs, carrying out domestic tasks at members' homes, waiting for domestic deliveries, accompanying the member on personal business, organising personal events, subject to unwelcome comments about their clothing, their weight, their looks. They describe being required to go to and sometimes stay at the MP's home and to socialise with them. Others describe being invited out for dinner and on trips, sometimes on the false pretext that they were work-related events. A number of contributors describe being plied with alcohol on these occasions. That is really shocking stuff.
Well, I think what you're demonstrating there is there's a real power imbalance in the relationship. I mean, employment protection in this country is pretty weak anyway, but in this situation, you've not only got a very weak legal background, but you've also got the fact that actually the person who's making these requests has got your entire career in their hands, and if you refuse, that can really count against you.
So just on that point, Elliot, should IPSA, for example, should they be like the HR department for staff, or should there be a new HR department? What?
I'm not sure if IPSA is quite the right body, because I think there's still a difficult and tense relationship between MPs and IPSA. But there certainly needs to be something analogous to it, because the Commission can say things should happen, and we should definitely make progress, but it's down to them.
Yeah.
They are the body which governs the House of Commons by statute, so get on with it.
Quick final word, Kate?
This is all about the abuse of power, as Justin says, but it's also about MPs who refuse to apply the rules to themselves that are applied in any other workplace. And I just wanted to remind viewers of the expenses scandal, which was a huge thing a few years ago. Yeah. That was also about MPs who refused to play who thought they were elite, who thought this is about elitism.
Which is what Katie said to us last year. They think they're a different social ranking to us.
But actually, the abuse, the harassment, the abuse of power, when it comes to bullying, when it comes to sexual harassment, has not generated the same kind of scandal as the abuse of power with relation to expenses. I don't know why that is, but until we recognise that this is about a political elite abusing their position, just as they did with the expenses scandal, we won't act in the way that we did then.
OK. Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much. Kate Morby, Hannah White, Justin Meadows and Elliot Wilson. Thank you very much. We'll see what happens. We'll keep on it. Thank you.